Hey everyone. I was just going through some of my videos and I came across this one that I partially recorded a little while ago. And for various reasons, I didn't get back to finishing it. I've had a listen and I've decided that even though it is a little bit rough, I'm going to just publish it as it is. It's quite detailed and there's quite a lot of good information in there about how ACON is able to use the Australian Workplace Equality Index to directly impact workplaces where it's been implemented. So please do have a listen, leave a comment below, let me know what you think, and please do get in touch if this is happening at your workplace too. Okay, enjoy. Hi, I'm Kowalski. I'd like to talk today about ACON's Pride in Diversity scheme and its annual ranking program, the Australian Workplace Equalities Index. So the Pride in Diversity scheme has over 130 business and government members. Over 40 members are government organisations in Australia. The Australian Workplace Equalities Index encourages members to complete tasks in order to gain points. You get a maximum of 200 points available to you. However, it's almost impossible to get to that maximum number. And the top tier organisations are achieving around the 160 point mark. And the scheme, the ranking system does change annually depending on the context. So they can always move that bar further and further away. So I've done quite extensive research into the Australian Workplace Equalities Index and the questions that are being asked. And I've grouped these into categories around what I believe are the four pillars that ACON is aiming to achieve with the AWEI. Now, the four pillars of action that I can see are firstly, developing the marketplace. So that is creating a marketplace for LGBTQ services and bringing revenue back into the LGBTQ economy. I think it's really important to note here that I don't think ACON are trying to actually gain revenue for ACON exclusively, but they are trying to generate a market for LGBTQ services, even if those services are being performed by other companies. Secondly, there is the gears pillar. So this is organisational changes that can be made on the ground immediately. This is organising the organisation, so to speak, to immediately mobilise and make small but real changes that immediately impact the workplace culture. Thirdly, there's the spreading seeds, and this is promoting the external networks. So this is spreading that inclusion message and spreading ACON's message beyond the organisation by trying to induce vendors and clients, new hires, and everyone that you deal with to come on board. And fourthly, most importantly, there's the internal networks. So there are some really strong actions required by the AWEI to create internal self-sustaining activist networks within the organisation. And I'll go into each of these in a little bit more detail. Now, firstly, marketplace. So the aim here is to create an LGBTQ marketplace. So there are a number of activities that an organisation who's participating in the Australian Workplace Equalities Index will be asked to undertake that go towards the development of an LGBTQ marketplace. These include engaging face-to-face training, online training, and getting professional development specifically for your LGBTQ employees. It may or may not be on LGBTQ issues, but it's for those employees. There is also charity and fundraising and pro bono work that you're expected to undertake. So there are several line items around getting your employees to raise funds for an LGBTQ charity, financially supporting or providing pro bono assistance to an LGBTQ charity, and having an employer branded participation at community events. Now, note that actually getting your branding on a marquee at an event usually requires a donation to that event, or for you to purchase some sort of, some sort of service, or buy into the event in some way. So this is actually just asking for money to go into the LGBTQ economy. Then there is more specific requests around LGBTQ businesses. So you're expected to have LGBTQ specific training for your staff, to engage an external expertise or a consultancy in LGBTQ issues. Now, this could be ACON, but it doesn't have to be. There are a number of other bodies out there that are acceptable. Of course, there's a bit of a sweetener in that if you do choose ACON, you don't have to prove anything else. You just have to say you've chosen them. And you've got to get your staff going to LGBTQ conferences, events, and seminars, and to actually prove that they've been along to those. So this is all about just creating an environment where there is somebody with their hand in their pocket wanting to spend money on LGBTQ goods, and services, and charities. And in order to get those points, the organisations, they do comply, and they are going out there and they're spending that money. Now, secondly, gears. Gears are the immediate on-the-ground operational changes that immediately implement ACON suggestions, and they can dramatically change workplace culture. There are a number of items in the Australian Workplace Equalities Index that go directly to these gears. And some of these are LGBTQ, and some of them are specifically for transgender diverse or trans queer. And they specifically leave off the LGB. So there is centering LGBTQ in policies. So you have to change your policies and procedures, for example, to remove words like sexual preference or lifestyle choice. And if you have external policy providers or external service providers, they have to change the wording in their brochures as well. You must explicitly mention LGBTQ in different policies and benefits. For example, new parent leave, you must say, a new mother gets this leave, a new father gets this leave, and a new parent in a same-sex couple gets this leave as well. And you've got to explicitly mention LGBTQ in travel advice policies, family violence policies. And if you don't have those policies, then you need to create them. Now, bullying is redefined. So there are a number of points to redefine workplace bullying to specifically include and centre LGBTQ. So there has to be particular communications on language that might be offensive to LGBTQ people. There has to be specific training for HR and grievance officers. There needs to be examples of what constitutes bullying and harassment of an LGBTQ person. And importantly, you have to have a specific incident tracker for LGBTQ incidents. So, for example, if somebody pushes me down the stairs, that is an incident, or it's possibly bullying. But if they push me down the stairs and use a slur against me and, a homophobic slur, then that goes in the special incident register. So, so it's really making a special case that this is a different kind of bullying. There are also specific benefits that need to be brought in for trans and gender diverse people, not LGB, but transgender diverse. So the creation of a gender affirmation policy and process is required. Now, this doesn't have to give you any special provisions. The policy could say there are no special provisions, but you have to have a policy. However, if you want more points, then you can also tack on gender affirmation leave. And there is a line item for special recruitment processes for trans and gender diverse people. So that means flagging positions are transgender diverse appropriate or inclusive, and also having a special process to make sure that trans and gender diverse people feel welcome in applying. So essentially ushering them through the process of flagging them as people that you want to pay attention to. In the working environment, there are provisions to change the toilets from male, female, unisex to all gender. Unisex is not permitted. Dress codes and uniforms, updating computer systems to accept non-binary options, updating forms to accept non-binary options. So these two might sound quite trivial, but it's actually can be quite costly to update all of your forms and your computer systems. There's a lot of effort that needs to go into it, and sometimes you'll need to actually pay money to get a consultant to come in and to do it for you. And I'm just noting there could also be some consultation revenue attached here. So you might be at the beginning of your project to update all of your forms to make them non-binary friendly, and you want to check that it's going to be acceptable to ACON, and so you can call up and you can buy some consulting hours and make sure that you're doing the right thing. Now in the second column, there are a number of items around developing organisational capability that favour trans and gender diverse people. Sorry, not just transgender diverse, LGBTQ. So there is the HR and diversity professionals need to have LGBTQ and diversity in their accountabilities. So in their role descriptions, they will now be accountable for the inclusion and diversity of LGBTQ people. You have to have executive sponsors, so people at the highest level of the organisation who are making sure that diversity and inclusion is happening. Your senior management must have accountability for diversity. And so this doesn't mean just that they want it to happen, but it's in their statistics for the year, and their bonuses are attached to it, for example, or their performance review is attached to it. Their continuation in the role is attached to it. You've got to have documented strategy. Again, this takes time and effort and a lot of bodies on the ground to produce these kinds of things. You have to have an LGBT advisory group and an LGBT inclusion reporting. So that means that when you have your yearly inclusion or wellbeing survey, you must have LGBTQ questions in that survey. Now, down here in the red, I think this is actually quite genius on ACON's part. You do get points for participating in their survey and for feeding back the information. And if you have questions around LGBTQ in your regular yearly survey, you will get points by giving ACON that data. So they've embedded the market research into the tool that they're using here. So thirdly, we have spreading seeds. Now this is where we are going beyond the organisation itself and actually broadcasting our support of the LGBTQ to others. And this can be in the form of just simply, badging, participating in events, just signaling, yes, we're LGBTQ friendly. However, it goes beyond that and actually requiring some vendors and requiring some vendors to also be LGBTQ friendly. All right, so there are a number of items here. So activities, you need to have an LGBTQ social media stream. So this might be fine for, say, for some organizations. Perhaps you're okay, activities. So you must have an LGBTQ social media stream. This might be fine for some organizations. For example, ABC, they have an LGBTQ dedicated Instagram channel. But New South Wales Police, Queensland Police, think about all of those government departments that you don't necessarily think of as social media boffins. Australian Taxation Office, Attorney General's Department, they're all members. And now they would be required to have a special social media stream dedicated to LGBTQ. It's a little bit out of step with what we think of as being their mission. Any media coverage. So if you have negative media coverage at all, it is minus 25 points. So back at the very beginning, I said that the maximum score possible was 200 points. And most of the top tier organizations were getting around 160. So if you lose 25 points for negative press, that's quite catastrophic. Considering that your LGBTQ social media stream might only be worth about 2 or 3 points for all of that effort. You need to have your CEO or equivalent at speaking events talking about LGBTQ issues. So it's not just sufficient for the organisation to raise a flag. It's not sufficient for the organisation to put the rainbow flag badge on their website or on their job advertisements. Their CEO needs to go to an LGBTQ event and speak on behalf of the organisation about how friendly and inclusive the organisation is. This goes a little bit as well to that LGBTQ market, that all of these organisations are all looking for a speaking event that they can go to. So that increases the demand for events, and that increases the demand for this marketplace. You must have employer-branded participation at community events. So again, I think I mentioned that before, that this would also be associated with a donation to that community event. Not to mention the resources that would go into actually staffing that that stall or whatever it is that you were doing to participate there. You have to observe days of significance. So that's things like Transgender Day of Remembrance, that is transgender awareness, intersex awareness, etc. So it's not enough to participate at community events that are on the weekend. The workplace has to stop and hold a morning tea where everybody becomes aware of LGBTQ issues. Now, one of the really popular ones is Wear It Purple, because everybody finds it really easy to participate in. You just wear purple. You put a gold coin in the hat, and maybe you have some purple cupcakes or something like that. And you might think, okay, well, that's raising money, that's participating, that's the day of significance, and we can check all of those off at once. Except no, you can only use that event for one of those three criteria. You can't use it for three. So you have to actually have one raising money, one day of significance, and one community participation. In terms of badging and flags, your external website must promote LGBTQ. Your customer-facing staff must promote LGBTQ inclusion. So if you have any staff, they have to be inclusive. All of your customer-facing information must allow customers to change their gender markers if they wish to. And you've got to show that you've done strategic work in recruitment, supplier policy, or service provision. So what does that mean? That means that you have to show you have a strategy that influences recruitment, how you choose your suppliers, and how you provide your services so that they are LGBTQ inclusive. Now, lastly, influence. Your contracts with your suppliers and with your customers should preference LGBTQ suppliers and customers. And you should ask them to also be LGBTQ inclusive. This includes your third-party employee assistance provider, and any other third-party policies that you have must mention LGBTQ. So, for example, you might have an insurance policy or a health insurance policy or a gym or anything like that must also mention LGBTQ. Now, last thing I want to talk about is the internal networks. Now, I think this is really where the Australian Workplace Equalities Index and Pride and Diversity is really aiming, and this is where all the work is really being done. So the AWEI is promoting an LGBTQ marketplace. It is creating immediate changes on the ground in workplaces, and it is pushing those changes out beyond the organisation. But the internal networks are the most important thing because they become the backbone, the self-sustaining backbone of this movement. So firstly, they establish a number of benefits to identifying yourself as LGBTQ and particularly transgender diverse. Now, for example, transition leave, or even the redefinition of bullying. So if you're LGBTQ, then there is a different criteria for bullying. There is more awareness of what constitutes bullying versus what constitutes treating you well and treating you with respect. And there's a lot of visibility around that. They also cast a really wide net around what is LGBTQ. So there are a number of line items to fulfill here. So visibility of LGBTQ women. A lot of organisations have chosen to promote a transgender woman in order to fulfill this criteria. But there is also another trend of the queer woman, or essentially the queer woman, who is essentially a heterosexual woman, or a heterosexual woman with bisexual leanings, who then speaks on behalf of all LGBTQ women. They rope in intersectionality, and so this is a gambit that attempts to bring all kinds of oppressions into the queer umbrella. Intersex allies, so there is a line item around allyship for intersex people, and broader inclusion. Okay, with executive representation, you must have executive leadership representation. There must be an out LGBTQ person in your executive. So if you don't have one, then what does that mean? Either someone has to come out, or it means you have to get someone who's already out. And so it creates this sort of, chance for movement, doesn't it? So there's suddenly a position to be filled for, like, literally the token gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender person. Okay, so that's where I got up to. Thanks very much for sticking around. I know it's quite dry and there is a lot of detailed information to get through there. As I said in the beginning, I did that one some time ago, and it was when I was still really assembling my thinking. So some of the language that I used to describe it, maybe I would have moved on from if I was to read you that video again today. I still do hope that you found it valuable. All right, so please leave a comment below if you found that interesting, and visit my blog, ladykitkowalski.wordpress.com, and please feel free to get in touch with me via email or Twitter if you'd like to have a further conversation about how ACON and the Australian Workplace Equality Index is impacting you at your workplace.